Happy Monday. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop here with the Center Square on YouTube each and every weekday morning at about 8 o'clock. We go live, where you can join the live chat room and a pretty vociferous bunch of people in there that you can communicate back and forth with about the news of the day. Of course, we like to look at what's going on in Illinois with Illinois in Focus. But don't forget, the Center Square, we've got reporters over in Washington, D.C., all the way to Washington State, and in between, you can find all kinds of headlines at thecentersquare.com. Get the newsletter to get the national headlines. You can also get a newsletter specifically crafted for Illinois, and that's where I find myself, the Illinois State House, keeping you posted as to what's going on with your tax dollars here in the land of Lincoln. So be sure to get the newsletter. It's free. We're a free newswire service, and we're driven by donations as well, so consider a donation there at thecentersquare.com. But also get the podcast, where you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus, and you'll be able to find that. Plus plenty of other podcasts, including Everyday Economics and so on. All can be found here with the Center Square on YouTube. All right, so last week was a busy week. You had both the House and the Senate in session. I believe only the House is coming into session this week. I'll have to double check that calendar. But for tomorrow, just a preview, we're going to look at what they were able to accomplish before the committee deadline out of both chambers last week. So we'll do a review of all the different bills that are advancing and kind of get a better idea of what some of the policy priorities are going to be for the legislature here in Illinois as we get to the end of spring session. So that's May 31st. We're just now in the early process of bills getting out of committee, and then they're going to be on one chamber floor before they have to go to the next chamber to go through committees and then be voted on there. All of that includes the budget. So we're going to be watching out for when that drops. Likely details won't come out until that last week of May. Details will be refined until all of a sudden they get to when they ultimately approve that budget. So that's one big thing we're going to be watching. It's a lot of tax dollars, a lot of your tax dollars. But we're also going to be continuing to track what's going on in Washington, D.C. and how it's going to impact the state of Illinois. In particular, we got to follow up on the closure of the executive order to start dismantling the U.S. Department of Education and President Donald Trump's executive order there, touching on, of course, the issue of DEI funding, and if certain states are still forcing DEI within certain aspects of public education, then they may have some funds withheld. So we'll see how that plays out. But clearly, a lot's going on, and I think it's why you need to subscribe, and hit that notification bell here with the Center Square on YouTube. All right, a couple of segments we're going to do today. One, we're going to look at ethics. What kind of ethics reforms are there going to be possible at the Illinois State House, especially after former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan was convicted of a variety of different corruption charges? So we'll touch on that history and hear what some Republicans are proposing. But I also talked with the Democratic chairman of the House Elections and Ethics Committee, State Representative Maurice West, and got his take on what we could see happen. So we'll get to that. But we also, next, got to tell you about the movement that has been around now 7 years, and that's to split the state into two. And what's behind this movement? I talked with G.H. Merritt on Friday. They've got an upcoming constitutional convention for New Illinois. So we'll hear details about that coming up here with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Thank you so much for waking up with us each and every weekday morning and watching the live to tape program as we bring you guys what's going on in the land of Lincoln. All right, go to thecentersquare.com and get that newsletter each and every morning in your inbox.
think our country is very divided, and we'd love to see it not be. And I think a big part of it is that when you have a very large group of people that is disenfranchised, that's going to cause division. And I think separating states maybe would help people get along better.
That's G.H. Merritt. She is the chairman of New Illinois. It's a political movement to try to bring about a new state in Illinois, to get away from the single state seeming to be governed by the state's largest city, Chicago, without any regard to the political leanings or philosophical differences of people in Southern Illinois. Welcome in. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. This has been an interesting thing to watch unfold over the past 7 years. And even before then, there have been discussions about shaking Illinois' political system up by creating new states. The idea here obviously is one of many, right? So you have New Illinois being one idea. You have Illinois separation is another group that's trying to look into splitting the state into two. You've also got what's going on over in Indiana, where apparently they're trying to set up a commission to address the couple of dozen counties in Illinois that have decided to hold non-binding referendum and approving those, voters overwhelmingly approving those in some areas, to support splitting the state in two. Then across the country, you've got portions of Oregon that want to break off and join another state. You've got Northern California that wants to split. Then you get President Donald Trump talking about bringing on new states like Greenland and Canada, while always you've had this back of the back of the room conversation of people wanting DC to be its own state, or places like Puerto Rico to be its own state, joining the United States. So this conversation is as old as the country is, right? I mean, we only started with 13 colonies turning into states, and then the expansion westward and all of the different states that were drawn and all the maps that were drawn. So we've been obviously with this map pretty solid since Hawaii came on, and there you go. That's how the lines are drawn. But some say that there's this divide in the country of rural versus urban. It's not even really political lines even. But this movement's been going on now for about 7 years, at least for New Illinois. So I talked with G.H. Merritt. She is the chairman of New Illinois, and she has a constitutional convention coming up. And this is from a conversation I had with her on Friday.
Well, April 4th and 5th, we're going to have our 7th session of a constitutional convention for New Illinois, and they're always really a blast. And this time, our keynote speaker Friday evening is going to be Sheila Weinberg from Truth in Accounting, and we're looking forward to really learning from her. And then on Saturday, we're going to have Representative Brad Halbrook, who has just recently filed the resolution for a new state. And then we'll also have Russ Clark, who's the treasurer of the Illinois Libertarian Party, and he's going to be talking about ballot access.
So again, that's coming up first weekend here of April. What is that, next week? So next weekend, what's the purpose of this convention? Is it to just bring like-minded people together, to network, to educate? What's the purpose of this convention? I asked G.H. Merritt.
Really, all of those things. It's wonderful to have that synergy of getting together with people who are part of our committees all over the state. We always have speakers that we learn from, stuff that'll be useful, like what I'm looking forward to with Sheila Weinberg is, okay, we see how Illinois is right now financially. What are the kind of things you can do to prevent that happening in a new state? And have suggestions for guardrails that you can put into a new state constitution. So that'll be really interesting. But we also do work there. We are, last November, we finished, after 2 years of work, the first draft of a constitution for the new state. And so what's been happening since then is work on the second draft. The people at the convention put in their 2 cents of what they thought was important. And so hopefully it's not going to take 2 years for the second draft, but it's definitely a working convention.
So the convention again coming up, we'll get details on that, but continuing my conversation with G.H. Merritt, the chairman of New Illinois, ask her about what I mentioned right off the front here. You've got not just what's happening in Illinois, you've got President Trump talking about bringing on Greenland and Canada, and the decades-old conversation about making D.C. its own state, or Puerto Rico, and then what's going on in Oregon and what's going on in California. And then you've got the issue with Indiana recently creating a commission where they're looking at the 20 some odd counties in southern Illinois that have said they want to split off from Illinois, and maybe making them absorbing those counties into Indiana, for example. So, I mean, that's another element to this conversation. I asked G.H. Merritt about all of that and what's really driving this.
You mean what's caused the momentum? I don't know. It's hard to narrow it down to one specific thing. I think our country is very divided, and we'd love to see it not be. And I think a big part of it is that when you have a very large group of people that is disenfranchised, that's going to cause division. And I think separating states maybe would help people get along better. I think too, I recently read an article, it talked about how the state lines were set in place 200 years ago, like Illinois became a state in 1818, when there weren't a whole lot of people living here at the time. And so you can't look at them as if they're the tablets that came down from Mount Sinai with Moses. It's as the population changes and many different things happen, you have to look at what is more appropriate.
It's interesting to kind of hear that perspective when it comes to, I mean, these lines are old. Things aren't the same as they were 200 years ago. There's some constitutional questions about, representation and whether or not a state like Illinois truly has true representation from people in, Cairo, for instance. Are they overpowered in how the state governs the people because of what's coming out of Chicago? But what about Indiana? I asked G.H. Merritt about that because, I mean, that's something that's right next door, and they've got a political movement over there that's seemingly trying to force this question onto the state of Illinois.
I was actually surprised that they brought this up because we are different from Oregon, that some of their counties are seeking to be part of Idaho. Oregon has like a normal level of state debt. Illinois has an extraordinary level of state debt. And so if another state wanted to take a chunk of Illinois, they'd have to take a proportional amount of that debt. Indiana runs about a $2 billion surplus. And so I thought, why would they even be interested in doing this? And I think that the real reason is that they want to get the attention of Governor Pritzker and Mayor Johnson, because their economy in Northwest Indiana is so tied into the economy of Chicago that if Chicago goes the way of Detroit and it is on, that is going to adversely affect them. And so they know that in order to activate this commission, it requires 5 commissioners from Illinois that Governor Pritzker will never appoint. So that's really what it is. I appreciated the fact that they saw us and heard us and empathized with the situation here. And it gave us an opportunity to draw some attention to our cause. We also went to testify. They invited us to come there. One of the reasons was they were looking at the 33 counties that have passed the advisory referendum, but that's a a whole the project of another organization that we're glad they're doing it because it's very valuable information about what the will of the people is. But there are a total of 68 counties that actually have some sort of state split movement going on. So we wanted to let them know that it wasn't just the 33.
I'll tell you, anytime we do a story on this issue, it blows up. I mean, imagine this video right now, the segments from the daily live show is going to probably do pretty well on YouTube. People are interested in this, and it's the overall movement of, trying to balance out the political landscape when it comes to state governments and everything down the line from taxing policy to education policy to parents' rights issues and Second Amendment issues and the cost of living and taxation and so on. But New Illinois, just one of those ideas in a kind of constellation of ideas on how to get this done. But they're holding a convention and they've been working on a new Illinois Constitution, and they've been doing it for several years here.
New Illinois came into existence, it'll be 7 years ago this spring. And so I think what's really important, people look at this on the surface and think it's a Democrat versus Republican thing. That is not the way we see it at all. It is a urban versus rural, small town and suburban thing. And also, we try to emphasize that Illinois has always been divided, but there was kind of a balance before. But in 1964, the Supreme Court ruling Reynolds v. Sims came down, and it changed the way that state Senate districts were apportioned. And at the time that happened, one of our U.S. senators at that time was Everett Dirksen, and he warned that in any state that had a sizable city, the Reynolds v. Sims ruling was going to cause all power in that state to be absorbed into that city, and that the rural people would lose their voice. That's what's happened. And when you take a state that already has a history of corruption and you apply Reynolds v. Sims to that causes all the power to be concentrated like that, that opens the door for no accountability, opens the door for more corruption, opens the door for them to do the kind of gerrymandering that over the years where Illinois receives an F from both Common Cause and the Princeton Gerrymandering Project. It's been their goal to silence the voices of their political opponents. So it's really not about party, but it's about the fact that the people of outstate Illinois don't really have a voice.
Again, that's G.H. Merritt. She is the chairman of New Illinois. They've got a convention coming up. She has those details.
It is going to be in Bloomington at the Chateau Hotel and Convention Center. It's going to be Friday evening, April 4th, and all day Saturday, April 5th.
We're going to do what we can to cover it and keep you posted as to what happens there, what the conversations are like, where they're planning on going in the months or years ahead, and just how long of a time this is going to take to happen, if there's any chance of it happening. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. Wake up with the live show each and every weekday morning by liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell, or just come over to the Center Square on YouTube every weekday morning at 8 o'clock, and we'll be live. But also check out the segments and get the newsletter. Go to thecentersquare.com.
I would have hoped that seeing the longest-serving Speaker of the House be indicted and convicted and soon to be sentenced this summer would have been enough to completely change this place and our ethics laws. Unfortunately, to this point, it has not shown that to be the case.
Democrats need to stop making corrupt politicians a protected class in Illinois.
It's just a couple of Republicans on Friday holding a news conference about ethics reforms and how they haven't really seen any movement towards shoring up Illinois ethics even after former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan was convicted on corruption charges. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, Associate Editor for Illinois, and I'm on the State House grounds when they're in session, running around, watching committees, tracking what they're saying, asking questions where I can, and reporting out to you at thecentersquare.com. So be sure to get that newsletter. But listen, we've looked at the ethics over time at the State House, having covered for the past decade plus of action and activity. It's pretty incredible when you're a reporter and then all of a sudden you see FBI trucks pull up and go into a senator's office, and then an hour and a half later you've got a bunch of FBI officers carrying totes of boxes of files out of the office, going back into their SUVs, and then driving off after serving a search warrant. I've seen that at the State House. I've read the transcripts of wiretap conversations of former House Speaker Michael Madigan talking to his political network, and that network going and executing on certain types of favors and such. Again, Madigan being found guilty of that. You've got a whole host of other things that have happened, from a state representative giving a bribe to a state senator to support gaming legislation. That individual was found guilty, and then the state senator found guilty on something else when it comes to tax charges. You've got a whole host of other instances. We can go back all the way. I mean, Blagojevich was just one of a long string of corruption. It's not just the State House, it's also in Chicago. I mean, Ed Burke was the longest serving Chicago alderman, and he's obviously got some tumultuous times ahead. So corruption is too often, from some perspectives, synonymous with Illinois and Chicago. But Republicans at the State House, who are in the super minority, they've been pushing for ethics reforms for quite some time. With the 2020 revelation of Madigan being public official A in the ComEd deferred prosecution agreement. Yes, you got to go all the way back 5 years ago. COVID was going on, and then federal prosecutors released this ComEd case, and stuff just really blew up from there. And then the subsequent charges against the ComEd 4, and then against Madigan, and then the trials of ComEd 4 being found guilty, and then Madigan being found guilty just earlier this year. Here we are now with not much conversation about ethics reforms. State Representative David Freese, he talked about all of the different bills that the Republicans have introduced to the State House that really haven't gone anywhere.
We've introduced the strong reforms we need to turn around our state's reputation for corruption. In fact, over the past several years, we've introduced more than 20 strong ethic reform proposals. None has received a fair hearing. The problem with the Democrats' inaction on ethics reform is so bad since Speaker Madigan's exit that it's actually caused the Inspector General at the time, Carol Pope, to resign in protest, calling the office a paper tiger. This spring, we have sponsored legislation to put teeth into the Legislative Inspector General's office, close lobbying loopholes that invite corruption, and restore public transparency to our state budget process, among others. How many more indictments and convictions will it take for those on the other side of the aisle to stop playing partisan games and work with us to actually solve these problems? Now I'd like to turn it over to Representative Dave Severin.
So we'll hear Dave Severin here in a moment, but Freese there, he laid out some of the different policy issues that they want to try to enact, including giving the Legislative Inspector General more teeth. That would be, for instance, saying that they could actually issue subpoenas without having to go to a committee that oversees the Legislative Inspector General, and that committee being made of some state legislators. So it's kind of like, the people use the term fox guarding the hen house, right? So a lot of history there, and I've tracked this history, and you can actually go and search the Center Square's archives and look up Legislative Inspector General Illinois, and you'll find a series of stories from 2016, 2017, 2018. Again, I've been on the ground reporting on this for the last decade plus. So a lot of history there, but not much action. Legislators did pass some changes to the legislative inspector general, but it really didn't give many powers to the LIG to do investigations of legislators if there's any alleged wrongdoing. And that led to the legislative inspector general resigning, saying that it was, as Freeze said, a paper tiger. So State Representative Dave Severin, he got up and said, we need more powers for the legislative inspector general. Some of the other bills that they have, they want to be able to make sure that the budget that passes is fully available to the public for at least 72 hours instead of being released an hour and a half before they vote on it. So that's an ethical issue, they say. They want to bring about more reforms when it comes to who can lobby, the revolving door for who can become a lobbyist. State legislator could resign and then become a lobbyist and make a lot more money as a lobbyist in very short order. They passed a bill to try to shore that up, but there's this weird loophole that even Republicans have used to essentially instantly become a lobbyist. So they want to tighten that up. They want to make sure that somebody who is charged with a public corruption, that they can't use campaign funds to defend themselves, something that Mike Madigan is doing in his defense. Even though he's been found guilty now, I imagine there could be appeals and such. So legislators are able to tap into those campaign funds to pay for that stuff. They want to try to block that from happening, and a whole host of other things that Republicans have proposed. Dave Severin getting up saying that these reforms are desperately needed.
Democrats need to stop making corrupt politicians a protected class in Illinois. They've even proposed these crazy laws: legalize prostitution, homeschool regulations that threaten homeschool families, the per-mile driving tax, unionizing cannabis dispensary workers, making the obese a protected class on par with protected religious, gender, and ethnic classes, California-style emission regulations for our cars. And let's not forget yesterday, the news reported as many as 400 state employees have been busted for stealing from the Paycheck Protection Program, better known as PPP. Our state employees were stealing COVID money right out from underneath the nose of this government. We need to clean up our state government, or people are going to leave the state for a less corrupt, more affordable place to live, start businesses, and raise their family.
So we'll hear more from what the Republicans had to say on this issue, but this was on Friday. Legislature was in session. They gavelled in, gavelled out, got their per diem, and then they held a news conference with the Republicans. But I was able to get in front of the House Elections and Ethics Committee chairman, State Representative Maurice West, a Democrat out of Rockford, and asked him about what kinds of ethics reforms are we going to see come out of his committee.
Well, I'm looking forward to robust discussions on all the legislation that is in my committee when it comes to ethics. Many of the sponsors have come to me asking for a subject matter, which is customary from my committee, and I have made that request known. I literally have a meeting at 10 a.m. with my staff for the committee to see what we're going to discuss now that committee deadline has finally ended. But I'm hopeful that we will have conversations around ethics this session.
So again, the question about what kinds of ethics reforms there could be, this was before the Republicans held their news conference, but I was anticipating, having been to other Republican news conferences about ethics, being one thing, giving the Inspector General some more teeth, the ability to do subpoenas without having to ask the Legislative Ethics Commission. And West said that he's open to hearing more about it.
What the Legislative Inspector General could look like, what the Legislative Ethics Commission could look like. And so there's conversations on both sides. I just asked my colleagues on the other side. I have been a reasonable person since 2019. Just come to me and let me see what I can do to get your bill heard. And we can go from there.
So he talked about how he wants to hear from Republican colleagues to have some things heard. I asked State Representative Patrick Windhorst, who's on the Ethics and Elections Committee, to respond to West, saying, hey, he's open to having these conversations. You just got to bring it to him.
That's good to hear, and I will be sure to have that conversation with Chairman West. I've spoken with him already about the operation of the committee and what we plan to see this year. Essentially, if you've covered the committee, you know we're doing subject matter hearings. Most of those hearings have been about election law changes, not ethics law changes. What we're putting forward today is a call to action. We need to move on these bills. We need to have these hearings, and we need to put forward a comprehensive package that is strong. What we've seen and what has been referenced as prior ethics reforms that were weak at best, some of them even leading to a resignation of the LIG. So I appreciate Chairman West's comments, but we need to see that backed up with action, and I'll be sure to reach out to him again to make sure that happens.
You know, it seems like every 6 months there's this kind of wave of ethics questions at the State House because there's ongoing corruption cases unfolding. I mean, you've got a former state or a current state senator, I think. I got to double check that roster. But somebody who's got a corruption trial coming up in just the weeks ahead. So there's going to be more attention on what kinds of ethical changes are needed to get ahead of these things. One question that always comes up, and I remember back when Senate President John Cullerton was still around, and this was after a series of people getting popped for corruption. What kinds of laws are necessary to keep this from happening? And Cullerton responded, and this is something we've heard from Democrats before, is there's already laws in place that allow for them to be held accountable. Typically, it's federal laws that federal prosecutors are going after to enforce, but regardless, they say, hey, the laws are on the books to make this happen. Windhorst was asked, is that enough?
Well, I would say that what it shows is we don't have sufficient guardrails to prevent that from happening in the first place. Ethics laws are to provide guardrails so that way public officials aren't going even close to committing criminal law violations. The ethics laws are designed to do that guardrail function so that way we don't have to worry about a federal prosecutor being the one to enforce our laws. We're actually keeping our public officials away from crossing that line.
So you've got the Madigan saga that's still going to play out. There's no question. But he's going to be sentenced in the weeks ahead after being found guilty of corruption. You've got the ComEd 4 that as well were guilty, and there's some questions about sentencing. So there's still a lot of legal maneuvering that's going to be happening here when it comes to the Madigan case. But what kind of lessons were learned from what we've found out in the Madigan trial and subsequent convictions? I asked State Representative Maurice West that question.
Well, for me, doing the right thing does pay off down here, because I was the only black legislator who was part of the 19. So.
And I want to just, in context, he was part of the 19 that originally came out and said they don't support Mike Madigan. And that was back in 2020 late, and then into 2021, where Madigan lost support for being the Speaker of the House. So West was one of the first ones to oppose Mike Madigan as Speaker.
Doing the right thing does yield dividends. However, Madigan is behind us now. Let's move forward. That's what I feel about it. And so we have legislation focused around ethics that has nothing to do with Speaker Madigan. So let's focus on that. Let's have conversations around that and stop looking for talking points around ethics.
Well, we'll see if the conversations do go that way. But I asked what kind of lessons were learned from Patrick Windhorst after the Madigan saga.
Well, part of that, when it comes to Speaker Madigan, is the phrase absolute power corrupts absolutely. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. He had complete control over what bills were called, how things moved through the legislative process. He was the leader of one of the two major parties in the state, the leader of the Democrats. Through that consolidation of power and money, he was able to control what occurred, and that allowed him to be in the position to commit the acts that he was accused of and eventually convicted of. We have to make sure that we are putting in our law elements that do not put all that power in one person's hands. And part of that is through the House rules, part of that is through legislation, part of that is through practice among the members, and then ultimately take it to the voters, and they will be, it is their government that we're representing.
Specifically on this package.
And I asked him about what kind of specifics from the package measures they have that would address these things. And he talked about the LIG. He talked about the lobbying prohibitions and a variety of other things. Will they actually address this in the future? Again, just to ask West about seeing these ethical questions being addressed before the end of May.
I would just say I'm very reluctant to publicize or even support, or not even support. I'm very reluctant to just publicize ethics without having the conversations in committee. And so, again, if my colleagues want their bill to be heard, come to me. and I'll bring it to my staff and see what we can do about that.
Okay, we'll be watching as well. But from Windhorst, he says that after seeing lack of movement after the Madigan saga, there's not much hope.
I would have hoped that seeing the longest-serving Speaker of the House be indicted and convicted and soon to be sentenced this summer would have been enough to completely change this place and our ethics laws. Unfortunately, to this point, it has not shown that to be the case. I don't want to be too cynical about it to say, well, if one more happens and finally the people on the other side will wake up. If the Madigan case didn't wake people up, I'm beginning to be doubtful that any case will. So part of this press conference is a call to action. It's not just to poke at the other side, it's to say this is a dire need of the state. It's a wake-up call.
It's a wake-up call for ethics reforms. Will anything happen this year? We'll watch closely. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and wake up with us live each and every weekday morning as we break down things you need to know to get your day going. I'm Greg Bishop, Associate Editor. Follow me anywhere. Just search Bishop on Air. All right, so all I got for you on this Monday. Greatly appreciate it, and people really got a kick out of the DJ Bishop. That's what I'm doing here. I'm just I'm a news jockey, I guess you could say, just to get you out the information you need. All sides. That way you can get started and do what you got to do in life. All right. So quick overview here. U.S. Supreme Court. We've been looking for the Snopes case out of Maryland about a gun ban. It has not been put on the list yet. All right. We're looking here at the latest order list for today, and I don't see any Snopes case on there. So still waiting for that. And not much movement in other cases. The appellate court case really hasn't had any movement in Illinois out of the Southern District, where Judge McGlynn said the gun ban in the state of Illinois was unconstitutional. So we'll see what happens with the appellate court there. A little bit of movement in the Schoenthal case. That's the ban on mass transit. We've also got pending cases dealing with FOID cards and other gun bans and so on. So there's going to have to be a lot to unpack on all of that. Got to get out of here. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of the day. We'll be back at it tomorrow morning with Illinois in Focus Daily, only here with the Center Square. Like, subscribe, get that notification bell, and get the newsletter where you get newsletters and podcasts where you get podcasts. All right, it's Illinois in Focus Daily.